In Snowflake, a virtual warehouse or warehouse refers to compute resources to run queries. In data engineering, warehouse typically means a data warehouse system, but in Snowflake, it typically denotes the computing power needed to run your workloads, whether it is an ad hoc query or data loading copy command or complete end-to-end data pipeline. So, if you are new to Snowflake and hear the term warehouse, don't get confused. It's simply the compute power that Snowflake provides. Snowflake operates under a data warehouse as a service model, where storage and compute resources follow a pay-as-you-go structure. This means you only pay for the services you use. Therefore, it is important to understand how to use Snowflake effectively to avoid overspending. This tutorial will cover more than 10 facts about virtual warehouses, also known as compute resources, that you might not be aware of or might not have paid enough attention to while working with Snowflake. So stay tuned until the end of this video and we will explore each of these facts in detail. Welcome to my channel Data Engineering Simplified. For all my demonstration, I will be utilizing the free trial edition of Snowflake on AWS. Make sure to adjust the video quality to 4K since all my recordings are in that resolution. To speed up your learning process, consider increasing the playback speed to 1.25x or 1.5x. For direct communication, feel free to message me on my Instagram account. If you are interested in system enhancing your Snowflake skill, check out my premium Udemy courses. Let's begin with our fact number 1. And here we will discuss the type of virtual warehouses provided by Snowflake. At very high level, Snowflake provides two types of computes: user-defined compute and serverless compute. Within user-defined compute, it can be further classified as a single cluster compute, multi-cluster compute, and Snowpark optimized compute. When it comes to serverless, you as a data engineer don't have much choice to configure, and it is automatically provisioned by Snowflake based on your declaration and scale in and scale out by Snowflake Cloud Service Layer as per the workload demand. If you are running a task or using pipe object to copy data or creating materialized views that refreshes automatically, all these object uses serverless compute provided by Snowflake. Task is an exceptional object where task can go with a serverless compute or it can go with user-defined compute. There are other services that uses serverless compute like data replication across the region, auto clustering, and search optimization services, so-called SOS. Let's go to Snowsite Web UI and start with user-defined virtual warehouses and understand how you can create single cluster or multi-cluster or Snowpark optimized user-defined compute. This is my Snowsite Web UI and I'm using Snowflake free trial account. If you look into this is my account admin role. And to create a virtual warehouse, you need to have either system admin or account admin role or a role which has privilege to create a virtual warehouse. So this is my admin menu and I click on this and this is my warehouse and let me click on warehouse. Here I can see all the existing virtual warehouses, which is right now in a suspended mode, and this is the size of the virtual warehouse. And this is the owner of the virtual warehouse. When I click on this button plus virtual warehouse, it brings another pop-up. And if I create this virtual warehouse, this will be created using account admin role. If you would like to create the virtual warehouse with system admin, then you have to go and change your profile as a system admin and then come back to this menu. So this is the name I have given for my virtual warehouse. And let me quickly provide the comment. Now, if I click onto this type button, it brings two options. One is called standard and another is called Snowpark optimized. So I'm going to create a standard virtual warehouse. And if you look into this option, it starts with extra small, 1 credit per hour, which we are going to cover in detail in the later part of this video. And it can go up to 6x large, where you are going to consume 512 credits per hour. And for extra small, you will have a 1 node cluster. As you go from extra small to medium, it will be multiplied by 2. And here it is a 2 node cluster, here it is a 4 node cluster, here it is a 8 node cluster, and so on. Now, if I click into this option, We are going to talk about this option in the later part of this video and try to understand how this parameter impacts the cost. If I have to create a multi-cluster virtual warehouse, then I can check this checkbox and it will allow me to create a multi-cluster virtual warehouse. So I'm not changing any parameter here. And let me click on this Create Warehouse button and let's create a standard virtual warehouse. This virtual warehouse, single cluster virtual warehouse. However, it can go from one node with extra small up to 512 node with 6x large cluster. So single cluster virtual warehouse can be multi-node virtual warehouse. So don't get confused with the word single. It is just a one single cluster. However, it can have one to many nodes as per your configuration. So my virtual warehouse is created successfully, named my first standard virtual warehouse 01, and it is of size extra small in the sense it is only one node cluster. As soon as I created this virtual warehouse using Snowflake Web UI, it has already started. And since it is a single cluster virtual warehouse, you can see only one blue bar. It is not having any query running, neither there is any queued query. And the owner of this warehouse object is account admin. And we all know the warehouse is account level object. And if you would like to know more about virtual warehouses, I would suggest you to go and watch this video. Now let me create other virtual warehouse, which is having more than one node cluster. And let's see how does it look like. And to have 8 node cluster, I am creating a large virtual warehouse and I'm not changing any other option. And let me click on my Create Warehouse button. Since it is a single cluster virtual warehouse, I am only getting one single blue bar here. If you hover on this header, it says size and you can readjust that. So this is a large and this is extra small. So this is 8 node single cluster virtual warehouse or a compute resource. This is one node single cluster virtual warehouse. Now let me quickly create a multi-cluster virtual warehouse. And here I can go and I can say that each of my cluster will have 4 nodes. To enable a multi-cluster virtual warehouse, I have to click on this multi-cluster virtual warehouse button. And it will give me an option called minimum cluster to maximum cluster. And we are going to discuss about these parameters at the later part of this video. And let me choose total 3. So it will start with 1 cluster and it will go up to 3 cluster. And I'm not changing any other parameters and clicking on my Create Warehouse button. So right now you see here I got 3 bar, and out of 3 bar, only 1 bar is blue, in the sense it is right now running one cluster which has total 4 nodes. Now I can click on this and I can click on edit and let me change this cluster. Let it be starting from 3 and save the warehouse. Now my warehouse is updated. Let me go back, and if you see here, all the 3 clusters are up and running. Now let's quickly create a Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse, and for that I can go here and to create a Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse, I have to click on Snowpark optimize option, and the moment I choose it, you see my options are changed. Now once I select this Snowpark optimized, I can still go and use multi-cluster virtual warehouse, but I'm not going to do that. And without changing any other parameter, let me click on Create Warehouse. So my 4th virtual warehouse is also created. If you really look into this icon, this looks slightly different versus my multi-cluster or single cluster virtual warehouse. Okay, and let me zoom out. So this optimize icon looks little different. So as soon as you see this icon, you can easily recognize that it is Snowpark optimize compute or virtual warehouse. So this is how we can create a user-defined virtual warehouse or compute resources. Other than that screen, through the query, we can also identify what kind of virtual warehouses we have. So let me run a command called show warehouses, and I can So when I run show warehouses, this is the result I get it. Let me maximize and shrink this option. So these are all my warehouses. So the warehouses which are created earlier are suspended and all other warehouses are running. So this is my type field. So if you look into that, Snowpark optimized or standard, you should look into this. This is indicating how many nodes we have it. If it is a multi-cluster warehouse, then this number would be more than 1. Okay. And this option is telling how many clusters are running right now. And this is the additional information about owner and the comment. Okay. So this is how you can create different kind of compute resources using Snowsite Web UI. And all the parameters are having a default value. So when you are creating a virtual warehouse without specifying the parameters, Snowflake automatically takes the default parameters. And we are going to talk about pros and cons of those default parameters in the later part of this video. Let's begin with our fact number 2. Auto resume and auto suspend are two very important properties that can be ignored if we are just learning Snowflake and using trial edition. But when we are part of any large enterprise environment where there are a lot of projects having different kind of workloads and each project has their own set of compute resources, if this parameter is not thought through properly, it may cost a lot. So let's go deeper and understand what these two properties are and how it impacts the cost. Let's say we are running a copy activity and the requirement says as soon as the file arrives to the external storage, a copy command should be executed, and to run this copy command, we have to use the load virtual warehouse. When we created the virtual warehouse, we kept the auto resume and auto suspend properties as a default values. Let's say the file arrives at 12 midnight. As soon as the copy command is triggered, the Snowflake will check the warehouse property, and since auto resume property is set to true, it will activate the warehouse from its suspended state. And when the warehouse is changing its state from suspended to activate, this duration is called a warm-up time. For the compute with one node cluster like extra small, this warm-up time would be few milliseconds and you would not even notice. For a large compute which may have 8 node cluster or 16 nodes cluster, it may go up to 10 to 12 seconds too. Now, the default auto suspend parameter is 5 minutes equals to 300 seconds. This virtual warehouse which just started running will be active for next 5 minutes even if there is no workload running. So, if your copy command is taking 30 seconds or maybe 90 seconds, the workload cost will be equal to the virtual warehouse uptime, and in this case, close to 300 seconds. So this is very important property, and for a large enterprise, it has to be checked on a regular basis, and we need to make sure that this property is set as per your workload size and how many parallel workload is running at the same given time. Try to run as many as workload with the same window to get the maximum utilization of your virtual warehouses and minimize the idle period. Let's begin with our fact number 3, where we will discuss how the compute cost is charged in terms of a credit value and how can you calculate the dollar cost of your workload. And is it really possible to calculate the dollar cost of your workload in Snowflake? The Snowflake does not display the dollar value on its warehouse monitoring screen at the warehouse level. Instead, all the metrics are represented in terms of credit value. The smallest virtual warehouse in Snowflake is referred as extra small, while the largest one is 6x large. Snowflake uses t-shirt size style for naming its warehouses. 5x and 6x large warehouses are not available in all the cloud and all the region. That's why 5x large and 6x large are shown in a different color. If you run your virtual warehouse continuously for an hour, an extra small compute, which uses only one node, will cost you $2. A small virtual warehouse utilizing a 2-node cluster will cost you $4. And if you start a 6x large virtual warehouse that uses 512 nodes cluster, running it for an hour will cost you $1,024. And if you run the same compute for a minute or 60 seconds, here is a pricing chart. Extra small with 1-node cluster will cost you $0.03. A small compute with 2-node cluster goes to $0.06. And 6x large 512 node cluster will cost you $17.06 for 60 seconds. Now let's go to Snowflake pricing portal to see how the cost changes when you select different region and different edition. So this is my Snowflake pricing page, and here I can select my cloud provider and the region. So right now it is AWS US East Northern Virginia, and price per Snowflake credit for standard is $2. For enterprise is $3, and for business critical, $4. So if you're running your workload, whether it is serving any query or not, Snowflake compute is up. The standard edition will cost you $2, followed by enterprise edition will cost you $3, and business critical will cost you $4. Now let me change this cloud provider and see how the price changes. So now I am going to use AWS EU London. Now for this particular selection, my standard price goes from $2 to $2.70. Enterprises remain $4, and my business critical goes to $5.40. Likewise, now let's go and choose Azure Australia East Sydney. So this is my selection. So my cloud provider is Azure, where my Snowflake is hosted, and the region is Australia East Sydney. So the standard price goes to $2.75. My enterprise edition price goes to $4.05, and my business critical goes to $5.50. If I come to my admin menu and this warehouse screen where I can see all my warehouses are listed, let me click on this load warehouse, which is currently suspended. Here, I would not be able to see any cost related item. This is only showing what time my virtual warehouse is active and what time it is not active. Click on this cost management. Here, it will show you how much money I have spent. And this is my compute price per credit. For the enterprise edition of Snowflake, the cost per credit is $3 for an extra small virtual warehouse, and it goes up to $1,536 per hour for an 6x large virtual warehouse. If you pay close attention, this represents a direct 50% increase in the cost. Therefore, if you are not utilizing any enterprise features in Snowflake, you need to be very cautious of this price increase, as your development, testing, and production cost would go up to 50%. Likewise, for a business critical edition of Snowflake, the cost per credit is $4 for an extra small virtual warehouse and goes up to $2,048 per hour for 6x large virtual warehouse. This represents a direct 100% increase in cost compared to the standard edition of Snowflake. Again, if you are not utilizing any business critical feature in Snowflake, you need to be very careful of this price increase, as your development activity, testing activity, and everything running in a production environment cost could go up to 100%. Let's begin with our fact number 4, the first 60-second billing concept. Since Snowflake follows a pay-as-you-go model, it is important to understand whether billing is based on an hourly, minute, or second level. We will use the same representation to understand the first 60-second billing concept. So when you submit your copy command or any kind of query that needs a virtual warehouse or a compute resource, and if the compute resource is in a suspended state, it changes its state and become active. And Snowflake charges for first 60 seconds, irrespective of whether your query is running for 10 seconds or a 30 seconds or 59 seconds. What it means that if you are running a query or executing a copy command in an standard edition of Snowflake with extra small compute, means one node cluster, the minimum workload cost would be around $0.03, and the same workload will cost you around $17.06 if you run it at 6x extra large virtual warehouse having 512 nodes. The cost will increase by 50% if the Snowflake edition is Enterprise edition, and it will increase by 100% if you're using Business Critical edition compared to the Standard edition. This pricing is based on their current pricing model, considering AWS as their cloud platform and North America is the region. If you would like to understand the exact pricing for other cloud provider and region, I would request you to go and refer their pricing chart. Coming back to the point, after first 60 seconds, Snowflake start following per second billing model, which is one of the very important things to note. So always remember, when you run different workload, be it a copy command or any kind of query execution, design and orchestrate them in such a way that they use the virtual warehouse idle time very smartly. Else, you would pay for unused uptime of your virtual warehouses. One more important thing to remember, when you create a virtual warehouse, don't create it using Snowsite Web UI. Always create it using a SQL statement, as you can use a parameter called initially suspended. By default, this parameter is false. And when you create a virtual warehouse using this parameter as a true, the compute resource will not start at the time of creation. So let's see them in action. So this is my Snowsite Web UI. If you look into this SQL, here I am creating a virtual warehouse. And I added one additional parameter called initially underscore suspended equals to true. By default, this parameter is set to false. So now let me create this virtual warehouse. So it is created successfully. And let me quickly run the show warehouse command. So if you look, this warehouse is right now suspended. And if I go back to my previous screen where Snowsite allows me to create a virtual warehouse through a pop-up, when I expand my advanced options, these are the properties available. However, I do not have any property called initially suspended equals to true or a false. So always remember, if you are creating a lot of virtual warehouses in Snowflake platform, to save the cost, make sure that you create it via SQL statement and have the initially suspended value equals to true, and also specify the auto suspend value equals to 60 and auto resume equals to. Let's begin with our fact number 5. Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse and smallest virtual warehouse. It is not must to have Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse to your Snowpark workload. Your Snowpark program can run on a standard virtual warehouse too. However, if you want to run a machine learning workload that is written using Snowpark and memory intensive, you can choose Snowpark optimized compute. The Snowpark compute start with a medium size and the cost 6 credit per hour. For 6x large, it costs 768 credit per hour. So this is 50% more expensive, and hence it is important for you to know when you and your team start using Snowpark optimized compute, and unless otherwise it is really required, avoid using Snowpark optimized compute. We have already created a Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse. Now let me quickly show how does it look like in our web UI screen. So I'm back to my warehouse creation screen. If you look into this type option, I can click on this type dropdown, and here I can find two options: standard virtual warehouse or Snowpark optimized virtual warehouse. And it clearly says Snowpark optimized warehouse offers a large memory and cache. They are often used for memory intensive operations. And if this is not your requirement, you don't need to use Snowpark optimized virtual warehouses. Prefer to use standard virtual warehouse. However, we have a catch here. If you have given your end user a privilege to create virtual warehouses, you cannot stop them creating standard or Snowpark optimized or a multi-cluster virtual warehouses. And that's why make sure you review the privileges of all the users and create warehouse grants only to those roles and users who understand the cost implication in Snowflake. Let's begin with fact number 6, and it's all about multi-cluster virtual warehouse. When we go for a larger virtual warehouse, the number of nodes increases as we change the size of compute. So extra small has just one node, the small warehouse has two nodes, and if I go further, 6x large cluster has 512 nodes. In multi-cluster virtual warehouse, the primary purpose is to handle concurrency and not to handle a heavy workload. So let's say we create a multi-cluster virtual warehouse, and as per this SQL definition, it's a medium-sized compute, which means it has 4 nodes per cluster, and initially the cluster count is 1 and it can go up to 4 cluster. So when a workload is assigned to this virtual warehouse by executing a query, it spins up a cluster of medium size, means 4 node cluster, and it starts serving to the user. Since it is a multi-cluster compute, if the workload increases and the first cluster is not able to serve the incoming queries, and we see a lot of query queuing up, the new instance of 4 node cluster spins up again by Snowflake to manage the additional queries. And as this workload concurrency continues to grow, more clusters are created and added to this multi-cluster virtual warehouse environment by Snowflake. All the properties like auto-resume and auto-suspend must be defined carefully, including scaling policy, while working with multi-cluster virtual warehouse. Multi-cluster virtual warehouse takes additional parameter called scaling policy, which has 2 values, standard versus economy. And we will see it by going to Snowsite WebUI screen. So if your end user can manage the query latency or delay, set the value to economy, else keep it standard. And continue to review the idle compute usage as you go. It is possible that both the min and max values are same, and in that case, all cluster will be up as soon as the query is fired. A medium virtual warehouse, which has a 4 node cluster with min and max value equals to 10, would cost you around $1.2 per minute for AWS instance in North America. As we discussed earlier, the biggest challenge with Snowflake that if you have given a grant to create a virtual warehouse, then such user can eat up thousands of dollars in a single day. And if you are a platform owner, you have to be very, very careful with this virtual warehouse settings. So let's go to our Snowsite WebUI and try to review the multi-cluster virtual warehouse configurations. So this is the screen where I'm going to create a new virtual warehouse of a type multi-cluster. I have given the name demo multi-cluster virtual warehouse, and I have given the comment. And let me click on this advanced options, and let me change this value to 1 minute. And here, if I click on this multi-cluster virtual warehouse, these are the additional configuration which I can set for the multi-cluster virtual warehouse. So I can start with 1 and can go up to 10. If I change this to 10, my max cluster is automatically 10. And if I go to 1, then this scaling policy appears automatically. And in the scaling policy, I have a standard as well as economy. The standard says minimize the queuing of workload. On the other side, it says conserve credit by running fully loaded clusters. So as per your business requirement and your latency requirement, you can either go with standard or economy. It is a general recommendation that you go for extra small virtual warehouse and set your minimum cluster from 1 to 3 or 5. And if you see a lot of queuing in this setup, you can really change your virtual warehouse size from extra small to a small or a medium, right? And as per this credit values per hour, and as per this minimum cluster and maximum cluster definition, your compute will be charged. You can go to your cost management screen, understand how this multi-cluster virtual warehouse is costing. So when you come to this screen and under the cluster option, you can see a multi-cluster virtual warehouse is representing multiple bars. Since it has a 3 cluster, it is indicating 3 bars. Let's begin with our fact number 7, and we'll talk about scale up versus scale out concept in Snowflake. When you are running a query, and if a query is taking longer than expected, or there are other queries that is being served by your virtual warehouse, you can simply change the size of your virtual warehouse and make it bigger. So you can change it from small to extra large and vice versa without any issue. This is not a very common practice, but in case you are running a very critical workload and on a particular day, the data volume is very high and your ETL job is taking longer than expected, and you can just run an alter statement, alter the size of your cluster, and Snowflake will seamlessly handle this resizing. And this is called scale in or scale out concept. This can be done using Snowside WebUI screen, or it can also be done using SQL alter statement. Now, is it possible to scale up in Snowflake? In my opinion, it is not possible to scale up in Snowflake, as Snowflake does not allow us to choose the size of the node. It only allows us to choose the number of nodes per cluster. But you cannot say what would be the size of my node per cluster. And that is one of the limitations. And Snowflake has kept that abstraction, so we don't need to worry about the actual size of the node. And all the complexities of data spilling and shuffling is taken care under the hood. Discuss fact number 8, resource monitoring. If you are a data engineer without sufficient privileges, this topic might seem a bit unfamiliar. However, deleting your Snowflake account from accidentally incurring hundreds of dollars in charges overnight. Whenever a compute or a virtual warehouse is created, it is important to associate a resource monitor with the compute. And let me show you what do I mean by that. So this is my Snowside WebUI, and I will execute the show warehouse command. And if I scroll right, here I can see something called resource monitor. And as of now, all the values are null. What does it mean? That I do not have any resource monitor associated with my virtual warehouse. Now let me show you how you can create a resource monitor and ensure that each virtual warehouse is having an upper limit. So by chance, if the virtual warehouse is running forever, with this resource monitor, we can really kill the virtual warehouse and save our cost. So for that, I can go to cost management and I can click on resource monitor. Now here it says that I do not have any resource monitor associated with this account. I need to make sure that I'm having an account admin role. So let me change it. Now when I click on the resource monitor, let's say I would like to give an upper limit of 20 credit per day. So I can specify 20. And I can say this is a warehouse level resource monitor. And I can choose as many virtual warehouses as possible at one go. And then I can click on customize. And here, instead of running it on a monthly basis, I can say apply a daily limit. And then I will put some action. So the first says suspend immediately and notify when this percentage is crossed. So let's say that this is 100% and it says suspend and notify when this percentage of credit is used. So I can say 80%. The difference between first one and second one, here it will forcefully suspend all the queries. However, in this case, it will wait for the query to complete and then it will suspend all the virtual warehouses. And this is my additional notification. So I can click on that and I can say create my resource monitor. So now my resource monitor is created and here it says that there are so many virtual warehouses which are mapped to this resource monitor. Now if I go back to and rerun this show warehouse, under this resource monitor, I can see my resource monitor is associated, and whenever any virtual warehouse crosses the credit limit of 20 in any given day, that virtual warehouse will be suspended automatically by Snowflake. And that way we can save a lot of cost. I already have a dedicated video on the resource monitor, and if you would like to understand more about it, I would request you to go and watch this video. Let's discuss the fact number 9. Different privileges that can be considered for a virtual warehouse and can be assigned to a role. You may think why it is important. compute or a virtual warehouse is an object which incur cost if created or managed incorrectly. If you have assigned an incorrect privileges to a role and a user belongs to that role has created a virtual warehouse that is not fit for your workload, it may incur a lot of cost without any tangible benefit. And that's why this is one of the important facts which we need to be aware of. When it comes to Snowflake Virtual Warehouse as an object, as on today, it supports 5 different privileges. And we are going to see all of them in practice. Before we go and try them using our Snowsite Web UI, let me quickly explain each of them. Let's talk about usage grant. If a usage grant is given to a role, it enables using a virtual warehouse and as a result, executing query on the warehouse. If the warehouse is configured to auto-resume when the SQL statement is submitted to it, the warehouse resumes automatically and execute the statement. So in any enterprise environment, most of the users should have the usage privileges. If you do not assign any other privileges, make sure virtual warehouse should have auto-resume and auto-suspend parameter configured appropriately. Next is a monitor privilege. It enables viewing current and past queries executed on a warehouse as well as usage statistics on the warehouse. So for your development team, it is important that you allow usage as well as monitor both the privileges so they can use the virtual warehouse and check which all queries are running. This monitor privileges make your development team more productive for analysis, for copying the old queries, and for any other monitoring purpose. Third is operate grant. It enables changing the state of a warehouse. It can stop, start, suspend, and resume, and enable viewing current and past queries executed on a warehouse and aborting any of the queries executing on the warehouse. For example, if you have an ops team and the ops team wants to start, stop, and suspend a particular query, that role should have these operate privileges. Now, next is a modify privileges. This grant enables altering any properties of a warehouse like auto-suspend, auto-resume, including changing its size. Now, the last one is apply grant, where you can associate a tag with a warehouse. And if you do not have these privileges, you won't be able to attach a tag. Monitor and apply privileges do not have direct impact on the cost of your virtual warehouse. If you assign a usage or operate or a modify role, and if these roles start using a virtual warehouse or start modifying a virtual warehouse, it will have direct or indirect impact on the cost in your Snowflake environment. So whenever you are designing custom role in your Snowflake environment, make sure that you pay good attention to this virtual warehouse privileges to those roles. Let's go to our Snowsite Web UI and see all of them in action. I'm back in my Snowsite Web UI. This is the warehouse screen. My current role is system admin and I'm able to see all the warehouses. Now let me change my role to public and let's see what all warehouses public role has access to. When I switch to role public, this role does not have access to any virtual warehouse. So let me go back to my sysadmin role. Now I'm clicking on ad hoc virtual warehouse. And here I click on privilege, select the role public and give my first role usage. Now I can click on grant privileges. Now privileges is granted, and if you would like to know what query is executed, you can go to monitoring and the query history. And here you can see this is a grant usage on warehouse to role public. Now let me switch my role to public. Now this public role can see the ad hoc virtual warehouse, and however, it cannot see any button called plus warehouse, in the sense this user cannot add any virtual warehouse. So let me quickly go to my worksheet. Since I'm a public role, I will have access to my sample data, and I'm going to select this sample data and say, so show table does not need any virtual warehouse. Now I can select a virtual warehouse from here. And then now I managed to get the result because I have usage access, and this ad hoc virtual warehouse is already having a auto resume and auto suspend parameter true. So I don't need any other privileges to use this virtual warehouse. Good. When I come back to this warehouse screen, I'm not able to see anything on monitoring. If I have to get an access to the monitoring privileges, I have to keep the monitoring privileges to public role. And for that, I will first switch to my sysadmin role. We have monitor privileges. So let me assign it. So I will go and click on that. And I say public role, then I will say monitor and grant privileges. Now you see public role has monitor and usage privileges. Now here I can see warehouse activity for my public role. So now right now I do not have operate privileges. So I cannot start and stop this virtual warehouse because I do not have operate privileges. Switching back to system admin and going to this virtual warehouse and clicking on this privileges and giving public as operate. Going back to public role. Now here, when I click on this, I can get this 3 button. So I can resume the virtual warehouse if it is not running. So let me click on that. So with the usage privileges, you won't be able to stop and start. And for that, virtual warehouse should have the parameter auto resume equals to true and auto suspend equals to some value. But once you give operate privileges, user like having a public role can also operate on that. But can I drop it? Let's try that. If I try to drop it, it says this role does not have enough privileges to operate on it. And if I try to edit, I can make the changes. However, the save warehouse is still disabled. Switching back to system admin and giving modify privileges and save it. Now I can also modify. So switching back to public and now I can click on edit. And here, if I want to change from 1 to 2, I can do that because I have modify privileges. So it worked for me. But can I drop it? No, I cannot still drop it because drop is possible only with the warehouse owners. And in this case, it is system admin or account admin. Again, if you are still confused with RBAC or DAC, I would suggest you to go and watch this particular video, which covers everything about Snowflake privileges and Snowflake ownership. Let's discuss our final fact, fact number 10. And here we would focus on warehouse cost management. If you are a data engineer without sufficient privileges, this topic might seem a bit unfamiliar. But don't worry about it. We will go to our Snowsite web UI and understand this topic in detail. Back to my Snowsite web UI and I have selected account admin role. Now when we talk about virtual warehouses and if you have usage as well as monitoring privileges, you would be able to see the warehouse activities. I click on this admin menu and here I have warehouses. And if I click on load virtual warehouse, this is how my screen looks like. And if you hover on this particular blue bar, this is not the credit cost, neither it is a dollar cost. It is primarily showing whether it is running, provisioning, blocked or queued. So don't get confused that this is a credit value. If you have to really see a credit value or a dollar cost, for that, you have to go to cost management and click on consumption. Here, you would see the credit cost for your warehouse. If you would like to see your total cost, you can just select all resources and all resources will appear. And I can choose a particular virtual warehouse. For example, I choose load underscore WH. And if I go and choose my large multi-cluster, for example, this 30 node, if you see, nothing happened, but it costed me 1.1 credit, which means roughly $2. And it means that there was no query running. My warehouse was idle. Let me choose this 16 node single cluster. And here, if you see, I executed one drop statement. So cost management is a very, very important screen where you can come and you can start validating what is the credit cost. If I come to the account overview, here I would be able to see my dollar value. And here I have spent around 34.07, which is 11.38 credits and $3 per credit price. Looks good. And if I go to the resource monitor, which we have seen earlier, my resource monitor quota is only 1.05 and I have given around 20 credit per day. I hope you got something valuable from this video. If you did, please hit the like button. Your support not only recognizes the work behind this free content, but also helps others to discover this playlist. And if you think it can help someone else in your team, feel free to share. Thanks for watching, and let's spread the knowledge and growth together.